I am Dr. Ruchika Verma, a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Psychology, University of Allahabad. I am going to present a module on the Sati tradition in Rajasthan and the case of Roop Kanwar, which has been written by Professor Sudha Chaudhary, Mohan Sukhadia University, Udaipur. The Sati tradition in Rajasthan is a very popular one, and the case of Roop Kanwar is also a very popular case in the history of women's studies. Why is it important to study the Sati tradition? Sati tradition in today's age of the new women, where there is a widespread resonance of the ongoing clamor for women's rights in India, it's a tradition which holds only historical relevance. However, if we today talk about Sati, it doesn't hold any relevance in the present course, because nowadays if we talk to a common woman that Sati is a tradition which has to be followed, then the woman herself will react in a very negative way, and there will be 100 questions against this particular tradition. However, since it existed in Hindu tradition long back and it has a historical relevance, it is important to mention and make students aware of this particular tradition in the Hindu systems. The next is that there was a protest against Roop Kanwar Sati. That Roop Kanwar case became a landmark in the history of Sati tradition in India, but how it began, that needs to be emphasized. Regarding the above notion, some pertinent questions can be raised. Has the concept of Sati become part of forgotten history? Has the underlying thought of Sati has been erased from our social consciousness? Have we finally abolished this ghastly form of violence against women? And has the social system in which Sati takes place been dismantled? Or is Sati a glorified tradition in its intrinsic character, which has no connection with the gruesome forms of structural violence like female bride burning, demand for virgins, gender discrimination, gender concept of disgraced entity, honor killing, dowry, witch hunting, womb marriages, and subjugation of crucial conjugal relation of different shades. These are the issues which needs to be studied, that whether we are talking about these things in the context of Sati Pratha also. Has women successfully won the war against the practice of Sati? Is it that although the practice of Sati dates back in the history long back, is it that still we have no relevance talking about Sati Pratha? What does Roop Kanwar's ceremonial murder in the year 1987 indicate? Without a sense of the history of the practice of Sati, we cannot diagnose and understand the social malaise of which Sati is just one of the symptoms. It shows that the phenomena of Sati is still not irrelevant for us. Therefore, without developing a profound insight in the story of women's sedentary, misogynous, value-based system, value Sati, the stumbling blocks in the movement of freedom and equality of women cannot be removed. So, what is actually we want to convey through this lecture is that although we are in the present social context, we are saying that this Sati Pratha is irrelevant and is not existing, but how can we forget that in the year 1987 itself, the case of Roop Kanwar, which is not very old, still the Pratha was existing. What is Sati? What is the meaning of Sati? It is very important to understand in the literary sense, which means a pure and virtuous woman, and this concept permits live widow burning in funeral pyre of her deceased husband. In mythology, the term has intrinsic metaphysical narratives related to it. Sati, also called Dakshayani, is one of the daughters of Prasuti and Daksh. Many mythological connections have been made with the Sati Pratha, and it has been depicted in the Hindu literature, Hindu Veds, Hindu Puran, and there are a lot of evidences which shows that Sati existed in the mythological monographs. Next is that what is the historical background? The history of Sati incidents, explicitly or implicitly, have a chronicled past. which are as old as the history of gender based subjugation in social relations. We find the history replete with hordes of stories, narratives, scriptures, sordid, polygamous tales related to female circumcision also. The whole system of sati is existing. There are many incidences which report that gender based subjugation existed in the social relations. The next thing in the historical background is that, like for example, in Brahma Puran, it is the highest duty of women to immolate herself after her husband, and this has been quoted in Brahma Puran. Similarly, in Mahabharat, Mausalva Puran 7.18, several of Krishna's wives performed sati upon his death, including Rukmani, Rohini, Devaki, Bhadra and Madhura. So, these are the evidences which prove that this practice was prevalent in the history of India, history of Hindu tradition also. Then next, the practice of sati is very common, and the prominent states in India where it was practiced was Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Bengal and Uttar Pradesh, where the reports were extended up to the 21st century. Some 30 cases of sati from 1937 to 1947 in the Rajput Shekhawati region are documented. According to a referred statistics, the official number being 28, and a well documented case Rani Sati Chavo Devi from Jhunjhunu, and in 1987 was that of 18-year-old Roop Kanwar. In 2002, a 65-year-old woman whose name was Kutlu died after sitting on her husband's pyre in the Panna district. And on 18th May 2006, a 35-year-old woman allegedly committed sati and sat on the blazing funeral pyre of her husband in Fatehpur district of Uttar Pradesh. So, the incidences are taking place and sati is still taking place till the year 2006. The pratha of sati was historically, it was started in the British rule only. By the end of the 18th century, the practice had been banned in territories held by some European powers. The Portuguese banned the practice in Goa by about 1565. Then the Dutch and the French banned it in Pondicherry, their respective colonies also. The British, following the example of the early rulers for a while, tried to regulate it by acquiring that it can be carried out in the presence of officials and strictly according to custom. And later on, the first formal ban was imposed in the year 1798 in the city of Calcutta by William Carey, and Wilberforce was the champion of this ban. They campaigned and they said that this pratha should be stopped. The next is then the later British, they developed the attitude in 1829. Bengal was fairly uncompromising later in the century, and British laws include provision that provided mitigation for murder when the person whose death is caused being above the age of 18 years suffers death or takes the risk of death with his own consent. However, William Sir Charles James Napier and William Bentinck made great efforts to reduce such practices. So, British, they played a very positive role in the abolishment of sati pratha in India. Then the next is the reforms movement against sati. We all know that on the basis of as the Indian leaders came forward and they were against the sati pratha, some of the prominent names were Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Ishwar Vidyasagar, Dayanand Saraswati, Mahadev Govind Ranade and many others. Fortunately and surprisingly, these were the male people who came forward, male members of our society who came forward and fought for the welfare of women and tried to stop sati pratha, and that was the beginning of the reforms movement against sati in India. The next is, then gradually there was a growing protest against sati in India at all levels, and many women's organizations against sati came forward, and in the case of Roop Kanwar, protest by various women's organizations catapulted the issue into public focus. All of a sudden, after Roop Kanwar case, that is after 1987, the whole issue of Sati Pratha came forward, and many organizations like for example Union for Civil Liberties, then Rajasthan University Women's Association, Sathin Karamchari Sangh, National Federation of Indian Women, under the banner of Mahila Atyachar Virodhi Jan Andolan, all people they came forward, all these organizations came forward and fight against Sati Pratha. The next then Sati Pratha had a significant place in the history of Rajasthan, because Rajasthan is one of those states where feudal remnants are not only in existence, but are rather flourishing under the nexus of caste and power. And there is an alarmingly increased number of incidents of Sati prove this fact. After independence of India, 40 cases has been registered, but mostly the reported case have taken place in Rajasthan. Roop Kanwar case was the 38th incident, and most of the cases came from Shekhawati area, where Sati is still glorified, where there are Sati temples and pujas are conducted, and Rani Sati in Jhunjhunu is considered as the mother of all Satis. She belonged to the Jalan family, and the mystery of her death remains unclear, but in 1996 there was a ban all over the country. However, people they celebrated, and still in Rajasthan there is a prominence of Sati in Sati has been practiced. The next is you can see the picture of the Rani Sati Mandir in Jhunjhunu. And then the religious, caste and psychological factors. There are so many factors which are responsible for the existence of this Sati Pratha. We are part of such society in which the sole source of our thoughts and behavior is religion, because religion plays a very important role in our existence, social existence. In its connotative traits, religion constructs two world views. One is transcendental, and second is transient. In its epistemic form, it adopts a metaphysical methodology rather than a dialectical one. However, the ceremonial killings of widows in the name of Sati is its ultimate example, is an example where the religion becomes blind and there is a blind following of mythological rituals. Now, this was questioned by many people, many reformers. However, the Sati Vrata, Chunri Mahotsav, Sakti, these are the rituals which reflect terms of disguise for cruelty towards a widow. So, religion did play a very important role in the in flourishing, in motivating the practices of Sati Pratha. There are then other factors. The psychological factors are that when the husband of a woman is died, then gradually she has to suffer lots of negative experiences in the family. Like for example, if it can be in the form of sexual harassment, it can be in the form of harassment in the social situations, abandonment from the social rituals, festivals, cannot enjoy anything. So, widows were taught that instead of dying daily, it is good for them to die on the pyre of their husbands. The next, the slavery, loneliness and sexual harassment were considered to be synonymous to the life of a widow, and the condition of widow is more dreadful than that of a slave. The pathetic status of widows shows that the treatment mered out of them is a major factor underlying which is promoting the practice of Sati, because they were taught that it is better to die one day instead of dying daily. The next issue which we consider in this particular module is what are the various laws against Sati. Sati or widow burning could not just be abolished overnight. It was in the minds of the people and it was ingrained through the religious practices. So, it has been a subject of much concern to different rulers. Historically, efforts to prevent Sati by formal means were attempted even before the Mughal rulers came to power. Many rulers had tried to stop the practice of Sati, like for example, Jahangir, Aurangzeb, Akbar, Lord William Bentinck, etc. were the champions of this act. In independent India, however, the Indian Penal Code came to existence and Sati was prohibited. Sati was a barbarous practice which could brook no justification according to section 300 IPC 1860. If on the facts it was found that the woman has been burning or burying alive of a woman is shown, then it will be considered as a murder. So, that act came into existence and the central government has passed the Commission of Sati Prevention Act of 1987. Following then, however, following the outcry after the Sati of Roop Kanwar, the Indian government enacted the Rajasthan Sati Prevention Ordinance in the year 1987 on October 1. Then there is a Chunari Mahotsav which has still been celebrated in Rajasthan, and there is a role of each state and its machinery in removing Sati Pratha. In the caste based and hierarchy society, the state and its agencies take up holds a lot of responsibility and they can decide how they can handle the problem of Sati. However, the case was not different in Roop Kanwar incident. Ministers, judges, police, politicians and the gamut of obscurantist forces were standing out to protecting these barbaric practices of womanhood. So, there is an important role of state in abolishment of any crime against women. The next is that whether the particular practice, Sati tradition, act as a catalyst for bringing to the foreground the tough social fabric of Indian society. This is actually another expression of power structure in society, and therefore, the argument is not only about the legitimacy of the Sati, but much more than that, the position of women in Indian society, about the sensitive relationship between man and women in social life, and also the issue of private property. This debate also demonstrates the dangerous nexus between religion, caste and politics, and the key question is that the orientation of women's movement, where we are going, where the movement is going and what we want to achieve. In order to develop, we must adopt a dialectical and historical analysis and not the temporary or present oriented approach. So, the question of prime importance is whether Sati itself is a problem or is it a consequence of an insensitive system that has high tolerance for such acts. Such a system provides widows two choices, either to burn in the husband's pyre or to go to Haridwar and Vrindavan and live a life of abstinence and suffering. Therefore, it is not merely about inner or individual change, it is about questioning the patriarchal system. Through such traditions and heteronormative ethical values, the system establishes its control over women's mental and physical life. There should be absolutely no place for a tradition that denies dignity to another human being. Thank you so much.